Welcome, 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 and thanks for listening. Tonight we're off to New Orleans to speak with the therapist, author, and wonderful glass sculpture artist, Lisa Tahir. We're focusing on her book called The Chiron Effect, Healing Our Core Wound, which really dives deep into the myth and archetype of the Greek Chiron, that magical, mystical centaur that served to guide and inspire humanity in its healing journey. And I've got to confess that I really do like the myth of the Chiron and the archetype of that wonderful centaur. It's so different than so many myths that humans come up with. So many myths are based upon humans dominating or controlling or subverting nature. And for example, going back to the Sumerian myth of Marduk and Tiamat, I mean, you've got man slaying a dragon, and out of the dragon's entrails, the universe is created. There's something like that in Norse mythology, where you've got Odin cutting up the chaotic giant and creating universes from that. Even the Christian myth of the serpent, the serpent has to be thrown out of the garden and relegated to crawling on its belly for the rest of eternity. I mean, this is not. There's something so much more interesting and elegant to me about the myth of the Chiron, which itself is the humans working with these hoofed creatures. And indeed, the centaur itself is part human and part horse. And I think we've got that element in us. We've got that snake, hoof, horned element in us that it makes sense rather than to dominate it, but to have a different relationship with it, perhaps. Or let it be the teacher. Or come to the realization, heaven forbid, and I do mean heaven forbid, that there is no separation between humans and the scaly, cloven, hoofed, horned creatures that we are. But without further ado, here's Lisa. So, Lisa, are you going to be the centaur, or am I going to be the centaur, or is Lynn going to be the centaur?
I think we can take turns.
Okay.
Well, we're all on our own healing journey, so I think that's apropos that we each represent Chiron, the healing centaur in Greek mythology.
All right.
Lovely, lovely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the myth of Chiron. I mean, what's the story?
In Greek mythology, Chiron, spelled Chiron, was a centaur, and most centaurs at the time in mythology were warring, rebellious, dangerous, half man, half horse centaurs. However, Chiron was different. He really embodied human consciousness along with innate animal instincts, and he was actually a founding father of medicine, of botany, of psychology. And when you go to the doctor's office and see the staff of medicine, the two snakes intertwined on a staff, Chiron actually gave that staff of medicine to Asclepius, whom he tutored in the healing arts. So Chiron really represents the embodiment of our innate animal instincts mediated through our heart center and incorporating our higher consciousness and morality, so to speak.
Yeah. So how did Chiron get to be the wounded healer? I mean, that's kind of a fascinating story, as it were.
Yes, Michael. In the story in Greek mythology, Chiron was wounded by a poisonous arrow, and it put him in touch with human pain and suffering and frailty. And he had a lot of empathy for humans, unlike other Greek gods and deities. And he asked Zeus to give up his immortality and in exchange to not suffer anymore. And so he just really he's about empathy. And that's what this Chiron placement in our astrological charts is about. It's about self-empathy. It's about really attuning to what our needs are, what we need that we didn't get, based around 12 placements of Chiron that can be found in your astrological birth chart, and what we need to do to heal.
So it's interesting, though, that I thought that, and I don't know what there's probably different versions of the myth, but
he gave up his own immortality in order to give a benefit to Prometheus,
Yes.
who is a very fascinating character as well. But before we get there, there was something about the idea that or let me approach it this way. Where does the idea of empathy in Chiron from? Is it the empathy to help Prometheus, who's getting his liver eaten out by every day? Or is there some other form of empathy that's inherent in the Chiron myth?
I'm not deeply versed in all of Greek mythology, so I'll take it to our human and personal level that Chiron really demonstrates that healing comes through empathy. And Chiron, when he was wounded, he felt a connection to humans. Other Greek deities did not. They were could care less, so to speak. But Chiron was very different. And so he is in the Carl Jung archetypes, the wounded healer, mythological archetype as well, about empathy, about self-compassion, about being reflective and going gentle and more easy with ourselves. And when we do, we're able to have more empathy for others. I think we can't give what we haven't really experienced or what we haven't cultivated within ourselves. So Chiron is really this beautiful invitation to stop beating up all over ourselves and start to ask, like, honey, what do you need? What do you need, little one, the inner child that we were, and to start there with our healing.
Is there an element of surrender in the Chiron myth too? The fact that he doesn't want to be immortal anymore to suffer the pain because he suffered the wound accidentally, as I understand it from the myth, and it was just so overwhelming for him that he decided to give it up. There's sort of a tenderness in that story, perhaps.
I think so. Absolutely, Michael. Yeah. Yes.
And then the empathy. It's interesting that I don't know if that's contained in the myth, but the fact that he gives the gift to Prometheus and sort of liberates him from the torment that Prometheus suffered because he gave humans fire, which is so interesting.
Very cool. Yes.
And how that all interrelates is interesting.
It is interesting.
So how did you sort of on your own journey resonate with this myth? I mean, how did you discover it?
Michael and Lynn, I was meditating and asking, why is it that I have many successful clients that are still experiencing anxiety and depression? And why was I still feeling anxious and depressed at times, despite having been in therapy a long time, having many tools, living a really wonderful life that I was creating? And I just started to hear that little whisper of Chiron. And if you know anything about when we ask questions, the universe source tends to speak to us in this very gentle and soft way at first. And when we are in tune with our intuition, and at first, I wasn't really impressed when I heard Chiron. I ignored it and it kept up for about a week. I was like, okay, universe, I'm just going to Google Chiron. And that's when I found out about Greek mythology, the comet/minor planet in our solar system named Chiron. And when I landed upon the astrological placement, that was the big aha, how Chiron in our birth chart really is about this area where we have thoughts. And the more we think a thought, it becomes a belief. And I'm thinking about your most recent episode with the great guest talking about beliefs. I was listening to that earlier. And our beliefs are what shape our lives. And we can only go as far as our largest limiting belief that we have about ourselves or about life. So I felt like this Chiron astrology thing was really key. And I just started delving in for about 3 years and writing and researching about it.
So go ahead.
Yeah.
I just want to follow up on that. So you really, the term came to you, Chiron, that word came to you, but you had no prior experience with it.
Just in grad school, Lynn, when I was in grad school in 1995, and I remember a survey of Carl Jung and the archetypes and Chiron, but that was the last time I had even given Chiron a thought, to be honest.
Wow, so then it just appears in your life.
Yeah.
Oh my.
So. And I knew to listen. I knew enough to listen to these hunches and follow them out.
Yes. Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to do that.
Thank you.
Yes.
What do you think about being a wounded healer makes you a more efficacious healer, perhaps.
Well, I love words and language, Michael. So I'm going to do a little switcheroo. I would consider myself to be a healing healer rather than a wounded healer, identifying with who we want to become, the journey that we're on. And I, in therapy as a younger person, as well as a lot of clients I worked with, have had experiences with practitioners that have you over identify with the wound for way too long. And my dear friend and mentor, Catherine Woodward Thomas, who just passed away in the last few weeks, speaks is better than anyone. She mentored me, she endorsed my book, and really helped me understand that we don't want to dwell so long in the wound that it disempowers us. We really want to identify with who is it that we want to become, and who do I have to show up as to then really start living that life. And it's really going from the wounding to the healing. That's the real pivot point. So I'm going to call myself a healing healer, not a wounded healer.
And as I recall from your book, early on, you talk about having had that desire to be a healer when you were, I think, like, as I recall, you were 5.
Yes,
And it was a very clear memory. Is that?
You're right. Thank you for that. Yeah, my parents found a note I scribbled at 5 years old. I want to be a psychiatrist. And I've
Yes.
always been very interested in why people, how we tick, what makes us who we are, what makes you do X, Y, and Z rather than me. Really fascinated with our psychological makeup and how our early experiences create along with our current choices. And I'm really big on personal responsibility, that whatever we've experienced, it might not have been your fault, but it's our responsibility to learn what we didn't know, for example, that caused us to have painful experiences so that we can start having beautiful and loving experiences.
So that empathy and also a sense of responsibility, those were part and parcel of your early life, it sounds like.
Very much
Yeah.
so, Lynn. Thank you for remembering that.
Yeah. I believe in your book, what I found interesting is you talk about, you kind of approach it in this subject in a couple of ways. One is that you said when we are wounded, a self-protection kicks in, but if we dwell in the space too long, it separates us from our human intuition and human wisdom.
Yeah.
Which I found kind of interesting. And then sort of you also equated that sort of dwelling in a space or circling around a space almost like a planetary pool. So
Yes.
it seemed to fit in nicely with sort of your other projects.
Thank you. I think we're all like mini solar systems. We habituate our people, places, and things and call that our daily routine. And we orbit each other and people orbit us. And I started to get curious about who I was orbiting around, who was orbiting around me, and did I enjoy those people and experiences? And for the instances where I said no, not really, it was up to me to maybe stop going there so much. And it didn't even have to be a conflict or a conversation, just changing my choices, that I'll text someone else instead of this person. For if somebody keeps letting me down, what if I stop doing that to myself, so to speak, and get back to the person that's actually been trying to reach me, or ask, hey, who could use a hello from me today? Like, who might need to hear, like, I don't know, something today, and just notice who comes to your mind. These are things I've started to incorporate, and I started feeling a lot happier as a result, or at least more peaceful. Because I don't know that we're always having these peak point emotional experiences every single day. I think it's more about having contentment. What do you both think about that?
The myth of Chiron, he gives up at the end. He gives up his life, and in a way, there's an element of what you were describing, I think, where you're giving up this past repetition that was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that myth is, maybe that's sort of a circling back to that myth that it's not about always enduring it, but to realize, the word, of course, surrender comes to mind, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely, Michael. When you surrender, meaning to hand over, so to speak.
Yeah. and make a deal with Zeus. Here, you can have it back. You can have it back. Here,
I
let
think
this
people do make
set this other guy free with my gift, my empathy.
and that's interesting the way you say it, because I think a lot of people do. I think there's a lot of stuff, baggage that we have around God, religion versus spirituality, and I think people do. I did when I was younger, not understanding that to me God is love, and it's not about this bargaining. Like if I do this, God does that. Like there's this unconditional love always available, and I think it's our human uh, constructs that there's not a lot of places or spaces where we go and experience, I think, unconditional love, especially when relationships are more transactional. So I think it's a lot to kind of start to be curious about unconditional love. How do I love myself unconditionally? How might I do that with some select others? And even in my spiritual life, maybe start to embrace this unconditional love that is available to me. And I don't know, just see how that influences and impacts your life. I wonder what you both think.
I think it's so interesting that you're you were very, I don't know if it's intuitive. You're also a very logical person, but that early on, this notion of sort of regathering your energy, recentering it, having it be the center be with you, and making decisions about your community interactions, about your interactions with others. It really requires you to have a sense of value in yourself.
Hmm.
And it's so true that it's easy. There are different models of religion across the board, and some of them are more thou shalt and thou shalt not, all the
Mhm.
rules, and what will happen to you if you don't follow the rules. But
Sure.
it sounds like relatively early in your life you had a sense that no, the depth is a relationship, and it's best if it's a relationship built on love, grounded in
Hmm.
love.
Yes.
Um, and there's great freedom in that. There's freedom to make mistakes, but also then feel safe in that relationship still. So it's very interesting that you had that insight early on.
Very well said. I think my grandparents, I'm thinking of Mimi and Pop, my mom's parents, as you're speaking, Len, and they were very influential in my early life and my childhood. And they were what you just said. They were so loving. And yet when I made a mistake, they would address it, but it was in a way that I never felt shamed or like I was bad. And it's like they helped me want to just do better. And I always knew I was loved. So I feel like it's because of them that I had this mindset.
Yeah, it's so important. It's so
Hmm.
important. Otherwise, children are caught up on the fear of punishment, the fear of doing things wrong, and it restricts not just their sense of freedom, but their capacities for exploration are sort of stunted, I think. And
Hmm.
one of the things that is clear in your work is that you're very creative and you
Thank
trust
you.
yourself. My sense is that you trust yourself.
I do now,
And
Lynn. I do
yes,
now. I didn't used
yes.
to, but I've learned. I think we really need to trust ourselves and our intuition that I hear you speaking about.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes. So it's very interesting. And I think there's even a term for these different approaches to various religions, but there is a clear distinction. Some people approach their religion through that sort of hellfire and damnation,
Hmm.
and others approach it from the sense of deep and um, unwavering love. So that's interesting.
I think it could be our relationship to religion, to God, to spirituality, that how we experienced it young. And I know my father, coming from Pakistan, experienced Islam as something really restrictive and really not like love. He really still to this day like is very anti religion. And even when I try to speak to him, like, Dad, spirituality is different. It's somehow all lumped into the same for him. And I
Yes.
think a lot of people, and the author Marianne Williamson talks so beautifully about reconciling with the religion of your childhood in some of her work. And I think that's so important if you do want to try to have some kind of spirituality or believe in something greater when there's been trauma there. I think there is like a repair. that has to be done.
I think that makes perfect sense. I think that makes perfect sense. And Mike, I sort of jumped in there. Were you headed in another direction?
No, not at all. I'm always following Professor Lynn,
Professor, yes.
except when you're reeling me back.
The wise professor. Absolutely.
I rely on your creative energy, Mike.
That'll be a mistake. Speaking of creative energy, I saw that our Lisa, and I don't know if you knew about this, Professor Lynn. She's an artist working with glass. She had an art exhibit, and the quote was that working with glass fits in with her mercurial personality. If I have that right, Lisa.
Yes. Thank you, Michael. I started taking glass classes at Tulane University here in New Orleans when I was in my 20s, and I started social work school and glass blowing, glass casting at the same exact time. And it's been over 30 years, and I love both. Glass is my therapy. I love the heat and anything that absorbs you in the present moment and creates a sense of mindfulness where when I'm doing glass, I'm just absorbed. Like I'm not thinking of what I'm doing tomorrow or what's coming an hour later. I'm just with the material because it's molten hot. There's a lot going on. You have to really pay attention. And I hope for everyone to have some moments like that in their lives, something that really captivates you. And I think it's such a relief. I think that's so healing in itself.
I agree. I agree. That is amazing. I think I recall reading that, but I didn't really absorb it. That's the medium within which you work, and
Yes.
that is incredible. That's
Thank
incredible.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
that's marvelous.
So how did the Dalai Lama get interested in empathy in your sort of work, or what to endorse you?
So this was my first book, so I didn't realize there's all these you have to have endorsements before the book is even finished. And so my publisher, it was a lot. Like I'm writing, and then my publisher, and again, my intuition told me about 6 months before, you're probably going to need endorsements. Why don't you start working on that now? So I reached out to some authors. Some said yes, some said no. And I got a little frustrated with the no's. And I sat down again to meditate. And I was like, okay, like this is just redirection. Let's not get bent out of shape over this. Like, Lisa, who would you really love to endorse your book on this planet? And I just thought, His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And then I started laughing. I was like, okay, Lisa, okay. And I was like, well, let me see if I could create this. So I found a way to reach out. I sent an email, and I knew when I hit send, you're not getting anything back. It was really from this more place of ego and from the rejection of the others. Like I felt like I wasn't embodied. And when I thought of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, I thought about him, and I do today, as embodying compassion, empathy, this real humbleness, and a desire to serve. And my email was far from those qualities. So I just let it go. And I asked in meditation, who do I need to become to receive the endorsement of His Holiness? And I actually started like a year before my publisher asked for endorsers. And I just kind of heard, Lisa, when your internet goes out and you're on the phone for 45 minutes with the internet, like you can be kind of rude to those people. And it's not their fault that your internet went out. So I noticed just being more mindful, being more polite, not getting short with people if there's a long line somewhere, like just kind of cleaning up the way I was showing up around somebody that I didn't know personally. And it was interesting. Like I started to authentically change and become more patient and not let those things rattle me like they used to. And it was maybe about a year of that I kind of heard in meditation, His Holiness, like, send me your book. I want to read it. And I created a whole new conversation, like to him. I shared the journey I was on from when I wrote the first time, really trying to embody more self-compassion, like I know he does. And just if he would consider my book and an endorsement, I'd be so grateful. And it was in less than 2 weeks that I received a beautiful, beautiful endorsement. And I sent him some glass art. He received it. So I got another thank you. So it was like this beautiful experience because I decided to change how I was showing up.
That's an incredible story. I love
Thank you.
that.
Thank
Wow.
you.
That really says so much about how you approach your life and what can happen based
Hmm.
upon how you approach your life. That's amazing.
Thank you, Lynn. And I share that because I feel like anyone listening, you can do this too. You can,
Yes.
whatever dream or desire you have, if you just sit and ask, like, who do I need to become? And show me those steps, like in a practical. I love practical wisdom,
Yes.
not just esoteric philosophy, but like in the here and now, what do I keep doing the same of? What do I change? Like show me. And then start like listening and taking those steps. Even if it seems weird, just try it out.
Have an open heart and an open
Yeah,
mind and give it a
exactly.
try. That's a very it sounds like such an emotion-based process, but it's an empirical process.
It is empirical.
It's
Yes.
not going to cost us anything to give that a try. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting you mentioned Catherine Woodward or Thomas. There's something about what you were saying reminds us. And see, we interviewed Catherine
Oh,
last month before she passed
oh my
away,
gosh,
and
what a
so
gift.
it's like not last episode, but maybe the episode before, or maybe the one before that. But
Oh, I'm going to listen. Thank
yeah,
you.
but there's something about and Lynn, can you help me out about her forward psychology about that what you're describing about not being it's like this is the way I am, I'm in this planetary rotation, this orbit, this magnetic pull, and then I'm going to break out of orbit.
Yeah.
I'm going to fly with my little centaur wings and do something. How would you describe it, that if Lynn, about what she was her interaction with the Dalai Lama? Is just like, this is like forward thinking. I mean, this is like
Oh, yes.
forward future
Hmm.
for
Yes.
what is Catherine Woodward talking about? Future forward, is it? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
reading her
Yeah.
new book right now.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that is the one we talked to her about.
I think
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
what's
It
true
was
about you.
Yes.
What's true about you. You
Yeah.
got
Hmm.
it. Yes. Yeah, that openness and the courage to try something different, to not be anchored back in what's happened
Yes.
necessarily, but to open
Yes.
yourself. It takes a great deal of trust and courage. It takes a
Hmm.
great deal of trust and courage. But oh my
Hmm.
goodness, her work, yeah, really demonstrated the power of that.
Yes.
As does, as you've narrated in your telling your story a little bit in the book, um, you take that same approach. You're willing to give things a go. You're willing
Thank
to
you. Yes.
back up and rethink and do whatever it takes. And there's real strength in that. Real
Thank
strength.
you, Lynn. I encourage
Yes.
people to do 2 week, 4 week experiments. That's how I started meditating. In
Ah,
fact, is that I said, you know what, Lisa, I'm just going to sit down. Let me do this for 2 weeks. Like, just sit there. Even if your mind wanders, you owe it to yourself to just experience this. Because I think unless we experience things, it's hard to really know how it will shape our life. And at the end of 2 weeks, I finally started to for my mind to kind of quiet. I was like, okay, I want to do this 2 more weeks. Let's do 30 days. Like people say a habit takes 30 days. And at the end of 30 days, I felt like I had a bit more capacity to be present. And I experimented with both guided meditations from YouTube and setting a
mhm.
timer for say 10 minutes in silence. And if I found in silence my mind was a little too loud, I'd switch to the guided, till I was having like a smoother emotional experience. And then I just never looked back. I just show up every morning to meditate. And that was at least, I think, dare I say, 10 years ago. And it's really changed my life for the better to take that time out for oneself.
That is so true. I can just agree with you personally on a personal basis
Yeah,
that I have found that as well. Yeah, to open to that and be able to sustain it, and yeah, it is an incredible journey.
it
Yeah,
is.
yeah, very much. So I don't want to take us off this wonderful thread, Mike. So if you have a
No, please
question you want
do.
to
Please
go,
do. Please do.
but I'm going to tell you that I was amazed that you, I think you trademarked psychoastrology. I
I
thought, well,
did.
that was brilliant. That
Thank you.
was wonderful. And, uh, but I realized how I have absolutely no background in astrology. Mind you, I do occasionally, you know, run across something on the net. Used to be in the newspaper. You'd look up and see what
Yes, I
right, right.
remember. And the
So
little scrolls, the scrolls they'd have at the
oh
grocery store
yes,
checkouts.
yes, yes,
Yes.
that's exactly. So, that was always kind of fun, but I have no sense about how you do it. So in reading, how important, I mean, front and center in your approach is the charting, I think you call it the astrological birth chart or natal chart,
Right.
is that?
Yes. They're the
And
same thing. Yes.
that is just that was fascinating to me. It's not just a matter of looking in the newspaper for for your birth date, apparently. So, but it figures significantly. You can certainly have an entree to your work by simply knowing your birth date. That's the beginning. But then there's really some substantial part of your process that involves knowing something about um, where to go after that. So it's not just a matter of your birth date. And I know that folks who are really into astrology will be like, oh my goodness, she really is a novice. Lynn really is a novice on this. But um, the heart of your approach seemed to be, how do you then work with what this core wound is? You may have a sense about, if I'm following your process, you may have a sense about where your vulnerability
Hmm.
is, where that wounded vulnerability is, but then what are you going to do with it? And I think that's such a
Exactly.
strength of your book.
Thank you.
Is about, now you have to go further and figure out how to work with this.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, and astrology for me in my book is the diagnostic point because
Yes.
I'm a licensed psychotherapist. Astrology was a new perspective and paradigm for me. I'm not an astrologer, so I used this diagnostic placement of Chiron based upon your date of birth and place of birth, generating Chiron in one of the 12 signs, in Aries or
Mhm.
Leo or Scorpio, just like your sun sign is,
Yes.
but it's different. And I was struggling, to be honest, like with astrology, like, are you telling me because of where the stars are, like, this is who I am? Like, I always kind of would argue kind of with the universe, like, I believe in free will and I can make choices. And I had the biggest download a few years ago. And it was like the universe was like, Lisa, you wrote your birth chart. So did everyone else. So stop arguing against yourself. Like, this is what, you thought you wanted to experience. And certainly we can develop the skills to transcend anything. It's not a fixed thing. It's like a flexible template, and I think a beautiful kind of a symbolic map, to understand ourselves, knowing that we can absolutely grow and change, and we're not dictated by a fixed chart, so to speak, is my belief. And
Mhm.
Chiron is really, like you were saying, Len, about this wounding vulnerability spectrum, that for some people that have experienced deep trauma, abuses, sexual abuse, domestic violence, physical abuse, abandonment, neglect, that's going to be a deeper wound in yourself where you might not feel like you're good enough. You very well could feel unworthy. Depression, suicidal thoughts, is a part of this placement, rather than somebody that it's more of like an ouch vulnerability. Every now and then you're like, oh, like it's not that deep of a wound. It's more of a vulnerability. So,
Mhm.
and I think as we heal the deeper traumas, it becomes that lesser vulnerability. It's like a healer told me once, Lisa, like right now, this depression is really loud on the stereo, like a stereo, but as you heal, the volume's going to go down. And I've always loved that metaphor because that's what happens as we heal. The volume of whatever it is starts to turn down. And we have our central nervous system is in regulation. There's real science to it that our central nervous system is not dysregulated. We're in regulation. So we're not spiking in adrenaline and cortisol and having this fight, flight, or freeze all the time that disconnects us from the ability to problem solve, in fact. And so that's really the healing journey, to to heal our central nervous system.
Yeah, so that's the whole process side of this, that follows then, if I'm understanding correctly, like not just your birth date, but looking at in the mapping, looking at the what you call the astrological house that Chiron is found in. And so I was, of course, thinking about this from a therapeutic standpoint. Then do you have a grasp? Do you help your clients do that mapping? Do they
I
bring to
do.
you their charts?
No,
Ah,
I'll just
okay.
ask them. Say, I like to start with the client. What's bringing you in? I want to always
Uh-huh.
start where someone
Uh-huh.
is, and I'll weave in at the right time. Hey, I do. If they don't know already, I have this body of work on Chiron. Would you mind if I look to see where it is in your birth chart? Like, which I always ask for a date of birth, but then I'll ask for a place of birth. And if a person has their time of birth, that gives the house placement of Chiron, which simply means that's the area of one's life that this wounding / vulnerability manifests. But you tend to know that. You tend to know if it's in your relationships versus at the workplace. So your time of birth is not as significant as your date and place of birth.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And I'll just kind of weave it in as it makes sense for someone.
Yes, so I wondered to myself, do you have clients who come to you and they have no concept of this, and so
Yeah.
you would introduce it at some
Yes.
point to them, if you felt it was appropriate.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then for other, I could easily see that people hear about this approach that you use and that they would seek you out
Yes,
specifically for that. They would
exactly.
come with some knowledge about um, astrology and how it works in their lives, and then they would choose you for that reason. Is
That
that?
happens exactly as well. Yes, Lynn.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
So, and do they, um, I imagine for them, reading the book would be different than for someone who doesn't have any background in it. I could see how it would appeal to people who thought, oh, this is interesting, I know nothing about it, but that it might be particularly appealing for someone who really already has a background and would come to you through that.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
wanted the information to be user friendly. So, whatever degree of experience and knowledge that you have about astrology, to me, that doesn't matter as much as to understand where you source these thinking patterns that become our beliefs about ourselves, about life, and how we can change that so we're not feeling stuck.
Yes. Your book, this is simply my perspective, but that you maintain that therapeutic approach even in your
Mm-hmm.
book, even as you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about this, and that
Yes.
there's a tremendous amount of the book where you're actually providing rich examples of
Thank
how
you.
this might work for someone in the latter part of the book. So that's an interesting balance.
Thank
So
you,
there's
Len.
there's something in that balance in that trademark, psychoastrology.
I wanted to give practical takeaway steps to everyone so you could begin right now doing something new or different and see how you feel, see what ripple effect that creates in your life.
Yes, yes, and it must be so rewarding then,
It is.
as you're following this process where you have clients who come back and they're telling you about how this
Mm-hmm.
journey is changing,
Yes, it's
changing
been
their
awesome.
lives. Yes, yes.
Yes, thank you.
And Mike, I've kind of co-opted our
Oh, no, no, no,
conversation.
no. I
I
love that.
apologize for
I love
that.
that. I love that. No, no. I was thinking, when I was hearing you discuss astrology placement is in a way, is it like the placement of the wound, like in Chiron, where his astrological placement was the injury that he received from the
Mm-hmm.
arrow in a specific location, and
Yes,
now he can work with it. Well, except he had a difficult time working with it, but
right.
but still, it allows it allows you to locate perhaps a, um, pain, trauma, whatever, where before it's sort of not as defined, perhaps.
well said, Michael. And I think one of the things that would be the hardest to hear, a client coming in and saying, like, I don't know what's wrong with me, that always created so much empathy within me. Like, wait, there's nothing wrong with you. Tell me what's going on, because you make sense in the context of your life experience. And I think this Chiron placement helps you center around one area of vulnerability. And for myself, knowing what that is, if my mood takes a dip, I can be like, how am I not valuing myself? Or how am I feeling? How am I not feeling like I'm being recognized by others? So I need to give some more self recognition to myself. And then that'll help me feel better. How am I over giving? And like, okay, pull back, Lisa. Like, so I'm able to kind of redirect myself and start to change my emotional experience in the present moment. Now knowing my Chiron placement to kind of get to a more neutral spot if I'm feeling upset about something.
One thing that's I'm still wondering about. You mentioned that this pain separates us from our natural human intuition. Could you maybe unpack that just a little bit about how
Sure.
that the pain would interfere with intuition?
Yeah, that goes back to a few moments ago when I was saying that when we're in fight, flight, or freeze, which typically happens when one is triggered, when we're triggered, it's like we go from 0 to 100. And in that moment, we are disconnected from our problem solving abilities, from our like intuition, that soft voice, and we are in hyper alert, hyper vigilance. Let me get safe. It's very like rash and very, it's not very nuanced. It's like I'm going to run, I'm going to flee, I'm going to stand there and argue, or I'm going to, that's the fight, flight, or freeze, just kind of freeze and shut down, like not have any awareness of like anything going on inside of us. And that really disconnects us from intuition and from that soft voice leading us to safety because we feel so unsafe in those triggered moments. So I invite, there's a section of the book about shifting, going from, I think instead of being reactive, being responsive. And that when we are triggered, it can really help to just take a few moments, like don't respond. If you can really put the phone down or ask the person, let me get back to you, I'm feeling really triggered. If we're able to pause to like get a handle upon our reaction and ask, like, what happened there? Like, what came up? Like, what are you feeling all these feelings about? And then we're able to respond instead of react. What do you both think about that?
Yeah, I think that you have a wonderful sense of that process.
Thank you.
And as you were describing it, of course, I recognized that. But also, for me, I think that having a meditative practice helps one to do that. There was a theorist this is decades ago, I believe the name was Theodore Reich, and
Okay.
he talked about listening with a third ear.
Oh, I love that.
And that's really being able to do therapy with that third ear is to observe the process as you're in the process therapeutically. And it sounds to me like that's what you're actually describing examples of. And do you feel that your meditative practice has also informed your therapeutic practice, your
Very much so,
psychotherapeutic practice?
Lynn. Yes, I feel like I can definitely listen with that third ear to borrow what you just shared, and I'm trying to do that more with my family. I feel like in our families is where the triggers might happen, and it's kind of like it's harder to refrain myself
Oh,
from.
that is so true. I will validate that.
Yeah, so that's the area I'm practicing currently to try to apply that in my family interactions. Yes.
Well, Lisa, we promised we'd get you out of here in 45 minutes, and I know that you have not only the book, but you've got a podcast, a website. Do you want to sort of tell people where they can reach you and what sort of activities you provide in your many offerings?
Thank you. Yes, my podcast is called All Things Therapy. I am in my 10th year of episodes this year in 2026. And my website is nolatherapy.com. It stands for New Orleans, Los Angeles Therapy.com. I live in both cities. I'm in New Orleans currently, and that's my Instagram, Nola Therapy. And I'd love to connect. And if you mention Michael and Lynn, I'm happy to give you half off a first session if you've never worked with me. So instead of $190, it would be $95 for a phone or Zoom session. Just mention this show, Lynn and or Michael, and I'd be happy to work with you to dive into your Chiron.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you for introducing us to this fascinating character and your wonderfully innovative approach to therapy.
You're welcome, and thank you both for your thoughtfulness and these deep, really meaningful questions. I love the energy of both of you. Thank you.
Oh, very nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.